I'm out in the bush with the new Land Rover Defender 90 and I'm really excited about this car because this is the cheapest Land Rover Defender you can currently get in Australia. And on first impressions, I've got to say, this could be the pick of the range as well. You're looking at around $75,000 before on-road costs for what you see here. This is a base 90 in terms of specification, and it's also got the entry-level motor under the bonnet there. And when you think about it, at that price point, it's in the ballpark of things like a top-spec Hilux, a top-spec Ranger, Land Cruiser 70 series. It really opens up to a different realm of competition that Land Rover normally doesn't compete against. Now, I've got to say though, base by name, but this actually has a lot going for it, this car, and I want to run you through everything today. Firstly, off-road capability. This thing is on coil springs. There is no fancy suspension going on here with airbags and controllers and all that sort of thing. Is this thing still really capable off-road? We're going to find out. And also the interior. I'll run you through all of that, and I have to say, it's probably a lot better than you might realize. And finally, that engine and powertrain. I'll run you through how this thing goes on road. We've got a long drive back to town when we're finished in the bush here, so we can really dig into what this thing is like to live with on a day-to-day basis. And importantly, is that engine up to the job? Let's go find out. With a starting price of $74,516 before on-road costs, this P300 grade Defender 90 undercuts the most expensive spec, that's a P400X, by nearly half. This specification includes a 10-inch Pivi Pro infotainment display, a semi-digital instrument cluster, cloth seats with partial electric adjustment, and dual zone climate control. On the outside, you've got LED lighting front and rear and these rather fetching 18-inch steel wheels. There are some other features that you might not expect on a base specification car. Things like a 360-degree camera, which does have some trick functions for off-roading and parking, keyless entry and push-button start, tyre pressure monitoring, and a litany of advanced safety technology. There are some optional extras in this test car, which pushes the as-tested price to $81,169, once again before on-road costs. Some of the big-ticket options here includes a front jump seat, front undershield, digital rear view mirror, and an electronic active rear differential. Some of these options do feel a little bit expensive, however. Privacy glass is $999. There actually isn't that much glass on this thing. It feels a little bit expensive. Floor mats on the inside, they are nice rubber floor mats, but they're over $300. And this thing on the front here, this sticker, that is $281. So yeah, you might like all this stuff, but you also might like to save the money and bring that asking price down a little bit. Another thing this Defender has fitted to it is this thing. It's not a iWatch or whatever it might be. This is an activity key, and it's done by Land Rover. It effectively allows you to lock the key inside the car. You can stick this on your wrist. It's waterproof. You can go surfing, go do whatever you want to do, and come back and unlock the car. That is pretty cool, but not everyone needs this, I suppose, and that is $910. So consider it. If you want it, yeah, get it, but you can get this thing for a little bit cheaper. One other thing I want to point out about this base specification Defender. On the back here, you've got a full-size spare mounted on the back of the door. You don't see that too often, but I also want to point out these 18-inch steel wheels. Higher specification Defenders get alloys. They can be 19s, they can be 20s, they can be all different styles, but these 18-inch steelies are something of a hero for the Defender, and these have just as much curb appeal, or if not more, than some of those fancier wheels. So for my money, I would be picking these, especially when you consider if you want to go off-road, this is the diameter and probably the style that you want. The boot of the Defender 90 measures in at 397 litres. Drop down that second row and you've got 1,563 litres at the ready. Numbers aside though, this boot is probably bigger than you might expect, especially if you're able to stack things up on top of each other a bit. Under the bonnet of this entry-level Defender 90 is a new engine option, a 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine which makes a very healthy 221 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. That runs through an 8-speed automatic gearbox along with a low-range transfer case and permanent all-wheel drive. Although this is the smallest engine in the Defender range, there is enough power there for a claimed 0-100 dash of 7.1 seconds. Fuel consumption is a claimed 10.1 litres per 100 Ks. One of the first things to talk about with this Defender off-road in this specification is the coil suspension. This is a new thing for the Defender. It originally came out in the 110 format with air suspension as standard, but now you can get coils. And I have to say, I have been pleasantly surprised by these coils off-road. It doesn't articulate like the air suspension Defender does, and it's just not as supple either in terms of soaking up bumps and that sort of thing. But this does feel really good overall. Because you've got a little bit less articulation on offer, this thing lifts wheels pretty quickly. Not straight away, but it does lift wheels a lot more than the air suspended Defender. But thankfully, because this traction control system is so good, I can hear it ticking along there just as I'm driving through these lumps and bumps. You can really get away with a lot in this Defender. Ground clearance is really, really good, even with the coil suspension. So the way they've got it set is somewhere in between standard height and off-road height, as you would get in the air suspension. So it's about 50 millimeters lower than an air suspended Defender in its higher setting. But because we're in a short wheelbase Defender, there are big tires, they're in each corner of the car. Clearance is generally really, really good. The departure angle in particular is very strong, as is the ramp over angle. So you can take things on at really funny angles. And although you do lift wheels a bit, the car has got enough brains to help you drive out of situations. And that adds to the fun of the car. It feels sort of drivable and chuckable. You can kind of just give something a go and see if it works out. And thanks to that short wheelbase, which measures in at 2,587 millimeters, you've got a small turning circle of only 11.3 meters, and that is handy for bush and town driving alike. Off-road, once you start putting on a little bit more speed, the suspension soaks up things really nicely. Actually, you can sort of, not rally the thing, but you can drive a little bit more spirited through corners on dirt. It feels nicely balanced. And this engine, yes, high capacity diesels reign off-road, but this engine is quite good. It's not as nice. It does feel a little bit lethargic in the low RPMs, especially when you compare it to the diesel engines and that P400 6-cylinder petrol. But it's got some mumbo when you need it, and as long as you keep it on the boil a little bit, it's got plenty of torque. There's 400 Newton meters there. That is a fair chunk of torque for such a small motor. So no, it's not the most capable, it's not the fastest in a straight line, it's also not the most luxurious, but I think it definitely has the most bang for buck in the range. It's really fun to drive, and it's kind of more approachable. You feel like you can take this thing a bit harder off-road because it's not worth as much money overall. 18-inch steel wheels, they're a good option for the off-roader. The tires are quite nice as well. They will give you a fair bit of off-road ability before you have to change or modify or anything like that. This thing is just begging to be taken up the beach, up the coast, or on a long road trip into the bush, go find a nice camp spot by the river, something like that. This does feel adventurous and fun, a little bit more than the more expensive Defenders. So this is what the interior of the cheapest specification Defender looks like inside, and for my money, this is fantastic. You've got the same size infotainment display as just about every other spec out there. It's got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, digital radio, native navigation, a lot of different functions going on as well. It's a great operating system. You don't get the premium steering wheel, but this feels fine. There are good controls on the steering wheel, and the digital instrument cluster, it's kind of 3/4 digital, 1/4 analog. There's a lot of real estate there that you can play around with in terms of functions and controls. It doesn't feel like a base spec car. Now, one thing that isn't included is this option here, and this is called a jump seat. It's probably not to everyone's taste, but I kind of warm to it a little bit, and then I think sometimes it's probably not that good either. So at the moment, this is kind of operating like a center console. It's an armrest, it works pretty well. It takes up a lot of room around here. You've got 2 cup holders, a spot to put something there, and you also get access to the additional power outlets for the second row, which is pretty useful. But if you want to squeeze another person into this Defender, pop it up, and there you go. That is a fully functioning seat. It is a little bit tight and it sits a bit higher, so it is a little bit fiddly. And you'll notice if you've got long legs, you do start to plow into the dashboard here a little bit. So it's probably best for kids, but this is quite a unique thing. I can't think of any other cars in the market that has something like this. So here we are in the second row of the Defender 90, and first things first, you can see there is a bit of legroom on offer and there's plenty of headroom as well. But probably the most impressive thing is the amount of visibility and spaciousness you've got in the back here. The seating position is quite high and you've got good visibility through the front here. The side windows, they're big, they don't open however. And you've got these things up here, Alpine windows. That's a very Defender feature and it just makes the cabin feel a little bit more airy for the people in the back here. But overall, I really can't fault the comfort. In terms of amenities, you've got air vents down here and you've also got plenty of power outlets, 2 USB-Cs and 2 12 volts as well, so there's no complaints there. Storage is perhaps a little bit light on. There's a thing here where you can put something small and your cup holder is down here near your feet, so there's a fair chance you might knock something out of there if you're going on the rough roads. But all in all, this is surprisingly good as a 4-seater, 5-seater at a pinch, and don't forget when you've got that jump seat, this could effectively seat 6. Naturally, this Defender is going to spend a lot of its time in the urban jungle, as they like to call it. But the good news with this P300 is that it's still really good in that regard. The short wheelbase car does have a little bit of a bucking nature to it, and that's common to all short wheelbase vehicles. It's just because the front wheels are so close to the rear, it just sort of seesaws a little bit, but it's not too bad. And this car is comfortable. Even on the coil springs, I'll be honest with you, I've driven an air suspended Defender and that was $150,000 worth. That was way too expensive. It's hard to pick the ride quality between the two. It's actually not that much different. This thing is good. And the engine isn't too bad either, to be honest with you. I had my reservations. I really like that P400. So that's a 3-litre 6-cylinder petrol. That's got nearly 300 kilowatts. But this 2-litre engine is pretty zippy. It's got a nice nature to it as well. It makes some nice noises when it's working hard. The exhaust has a little bit of a rumble at times and it's very responsive, which is what you want in this Defender. It's not a big car, but it is a little bit heavy. You could never call this thing a lightweight. So the engine does need to work hard to get moving, but when it is working hard, it is enjoyable. The Defender is left feeling a little bit like a jacked up hot hatch in a way because it's nimble. It's got a great turning circle. It's got this suspension that feels comfortable, but it's also responsive. You can feel what's going on underneath the car at all times, and you can push this thing to the limits as far as the tires will allow because the body sits flat, it's got nice balance, it steers well. The first thing that you'll notice is that the tires, because they've got a bit of off-road capability, just don't grip as well on-road. Servicing this Defender comes in at $1,950 for the first 5 years or 102,000 kilometers, and you've got a 5-year unlimited kilometer warranty as well. The Defender 90 P300 has an 838 kilogram payload and can tow 3,500 kilograms worth of braked trailer. Let me know in the comments below, do you reckon this is the best specification Defender you can get? Is it the best value for money, or would you be going somewhere else? And hit like if you enjoyed this video. I reckon this was great fun out here, pushing this thing around in the bush. And for me, I really like this specification Defender. It's a lot of fun and it doesn't really give up that many points to other more expensive variants. Yes, you can get more engine under the bonnet if you want. You can go diesel if you want. You can get things like leather, but none of those things seem to really take away from the core appeal of this Defender, and that is just a fun car to drive. So yes, you can get something like a Jimny or a Wrangler short wheelbase. They're a lot cheaper and they're also fun off-road, but it's hard to put your finger on why this thing just feels so special. I think because it's fun to drive on-road and off-road. It's got a lot of tech. I love the interior as well. It's a really special car overall. And for me, this is the pick of the range in a short wheelbase. For a 110, you might want diesel, you might want a bit more special stuff inside for the family, but for a 90, this thing is great fun and it's got everything that you need. And if you want to see a Defender push to its limits off-road, check out this video here. It's a Defender 110 and it's got air suspension, and we take it to the limit on a track called Mount Walker. It was a lot of fun and it was hard going, so check that one out. Thanks for watching.